Dynasty tight end rankings. Who do we got up in tier 1? So tier 1 is going to consist of Sam Laporte has got to be up there, right? Then we've got Trey McBride. We've got Hawkinson, and we've got Andrews. I feel like they're just all kind of together. You can mix it any way you want. You can put the two younger guys, Laporte and McBride, up top. I mean, Hawkinson's hurt right now, so if you want to put him behind Andrews, that's fine as well. But these are all guys that are scoring points as well as that have a lot of years left to play. I mean, none of these guys are crazy old.
No,
Right? Maybe
I
Mark
think
Andrews
Andrews is the oldest one.
is the oldest, but, so they're all relatively young. You've got Sam Laporta, who broke records, obviously, this year doing his thing. Trey McBride, who started getting a shit ton of targets once Kyler Murray came back. Are they gonna draft a wide receiver? Possibly. Is that gonna affect the targets that he gets? Probably not, the way that him and Kyler kinda have that connection, and there's no one else really there, so I
And
think
we've
like a
seen
Marvin Harrison only helps, a Neighbors only helps, like, Trey McBride, so I really do like Trey McBride because if you look at the targets that he was getting, like, if you add them up over the 17 games, it would have been, like, 140, 150, the amount of targets that he would have got, so
yeah, yeah.
again, Hawkinson coming back from injury, Andrews coming back from injury as well, but those are guys that we've seen, some crazy productive seasons from. That just is the tier 1 for me. So like I said, mix and match it kind of how you want, but I feel like that's kind of the solidified top 4-ish. And you could argue Kincaid as well. I was kind of
That's where
unsure
I was
whether to
gonna go.
throw him in the back of this tier or like start off the second tier.
I think
So
starting off tier 2 is I
I
feel
have
more
him starting
comfortable.
off tier 2. He can easily climb to tier 1. I mean, easily, but for now, I think we can slot him right in there in that tier 2-ish. But yeah, what do you think about some of these guys?
Yeah, I mean, listen, obviously, I've been a really big Sam Laporta guy since we knew, he was going to be in the draft, and even more of a Sam Laporta fan once I knew he was going to Detroit, considering the offensive skill guys they have around him. And the guy didn't disappoint. And to your point, when you were talking about Trey McBride, I think the interesting thing is that the wide receiver helps the tight end, right? Because Amon-Ra St. Brown, you can't tell me he doesn't help Sam Laporta be as productive as he is. Now, obviously, they have Gibbs and they have other guys on that team. Jared Goff kind of makes it go, but I think a really good wide receiver or a profile type wide receiver one only helps your tight end because, they're not going to roll the coverage his way mostly like they have been doing with Kelsey, right? Because Kelsey didn't have a wide receiver one type guy. You saw it. They can start to roll that coverage Kelsey's way and kind of take him out of the game. So yeah, I don't have too much of an issue. I do want to see Trey McBride have a fuller, consistent season, like a full stretch of the season, like we saw
For
pretty much.
sure.
Obviously, Laporta and then Andrews and Hawkinson have a resume to stand on, and that's why they belong in that tier. So I do want to see Trey McBride kind of over the full course of the season. And if they draft Marvin Harrison, he could be really productive. But Trey McBride definitely surprised me with a ton of his. And once they also, when Kyler came back, they released Zach Ertz, right? So that opened up Trey McBride as the featured tight end in that offense. So I think all the kind of things necessary for Trey McBride to break out in the latter half of the season was there. But I put Trey McBride last just because I want to see a full complement, a full season of consistency from him. I've seen that from those three guys ahead of him.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we always got to be a little bit early, right? We
Yeah,
can't
that's
always be
fair.
too late. But McBride was a good prospect. We knew he was going to be the guy after Ertz. Like we knew that was going to happen already. He was a sleeper guy, a stash guy to hold on to coming into this season. And then finally he got his chance and we saw what he can do now, with Kyler Murray. You don't just fall upon 9, 10 targets a game as a tight
For
end.
sure.
Like he's
For
getting
sure.
wide receiver volume. So, I'm confident in him going forward, but I can definitely understand to put him behind these other two guys because of the production, that you're going to get out of those guys. But McBride has a little bit of age advantage there. Kincaid leading off the second tier to go along with my boy. We're going to keep beating that drum of Kyle Pitts. And I could even make the argument to throw these guys even in the back because I think like any one of the like if Kincaid has some kind of killer top 3 season or Pitts has a killer top 3 season, they're vaulted up here now. Like anything can happen with these guys, but I do put them in tier 2 here along with Travis Kelce,
Yep.
along with Evan Ingram,
Yep.
along with George Kittle.
Yep.
So we've got some young potential in this tier that can vault up into that tier 1 pretty easily, and then we've got some older vets in this tier that are gonna give you the production right now. Well, this is what I've got for tier 2. We talked about Kincaid a little bit, does he take that next step up in that Buffalo offense where there's nobody else really there other than Diggs at the moment?
Kincaid had a stretch in there for about a month and change where he was no less than tight end 8.
Kyle Pitts, we know what he can do. We know that he had that 1,000-yard season, that rookie season. Only one other tight end in history has done that. And if you look at some of Kyle Pitts' numbers, like even right now, this season, and we know it wasn't like a great season for him, but he was third in slot snaps, first in air yards, first in air yard share, first in A dots, first in deep targets, first in unrealized air yards. Like he has some good metrics. There's a lot of things that are looking good for him. It just hasn't all came together. And he was coming back from the injury that was actually a lot worse than what we initially thought. That was kind of like hidden all season. So without Arthur Smith there, does he get unlocked? I mean, we know what the potential could be there. So I do like me some Kyle Pitts, which is why I have him there. Kelce, older guy, is the writing on the wall. Is he going to start to decline? We saw that this year with the nagging injuries. Does that continue?
He knows.
Ingram,
Yeah.
over 100 catches, which like nobody saw.
Tight end 2,
Nobody really realized that he had, what do you have, 110?
114.
So 114 catches for Ingram, which kind of went under the radar because he didn't really score a ton of tutties. He started scoring a few at the end, I know. And then we got George Kittle, who, again, a little bit older, gets banged up a little bit. He's going to have good games. He's going to have bad games, but he can have those killer games like you always mention.
Mhm.
I know you love you some George Kittle, but this is
I
the
do.
tier here for tier 2. What do you think about this tier and some of these guys?
Yeah, so I think with Kincaid, we kinda saw the flashes, right? When he first came in, when Dawson Knox got hurt for those 4 games and he was on IR, Kincaid came in and we were kind of waiting to see what he could do. And he jumped off the screen like he was making plays. He caught a couple of touchdowns, and we saw that he could be a go-to target. He could essentially be the number 2 target on that team going into next year as it currently stands. We don't know what Buffalo's going to do in the draft or free agency. I believe Gabe Davis is a free agent. So I really do like Dalton Kincaid, and kind of we've seen what he can do. And it's going to be up and down pretty much with any tight end. You can't expect crazy consistency. I know Sam Laporta may be the outlier here, and then Kelsey in the past, but with all these guys, there's going to be up and down games because virtually every tight end, really outside of Kelsey, is not the true number 1 target on any given offense, right? If any of these offenses, they all have pretty much number 1 wide receivers. We talked about Trey McBride. If they get Marvin Harrison, you got to imagine he's going to be the number 1 receiver on that team. So that's really an interesting thing. Kyle Pitts, I know that's your guy. The Atlanta situation is just so weird. And at what point do you say, meh, he's just another guy? Like, at what point do we get to that time? I'm not saying we're there yet. And he is incredibly young. I think Gavin in the chat said he's incredibly young. He's 23 years old. Like,
23.
I
So
get it.
we got
I get it.
we got
I get it.
time.
I get it. I totally get it. But they need a quarterback. Like, I don't feel good about their quarterback situation right now, right? We don't know what they're
So
gonna
are,
do.
are we gonna wait until the quarterback situation fixes and then
That's
Kyle
fair.
Pitts is valued incredibly high, or are we going to just bite the bullet right now, deal with the mediocre production that is going to do okay for you, and then just reap the benefits in the long run, or do you want to wait and then at that point it's too late, like once they do
No,
get a
the way
QB?
the way you look at it is definitely the right way for his specific situation. I totally agree with that. The real question is, would you rather have an Evan Ingram where you know who his quarterback is, you know the production you're going to get right now? Evan Ingram, obviously significantly older, not crazy old, 29. So there is a significant gap there, but just incredibly productive. Or would you rather have Kyle Pitts and the upside and hope that Atlanta figures it out at the quarterback position. So I think that's the bigger question for me. But I definitely understand where you're coming from in terms of you want to get before it, right? You want it to happen. You want to pick him up at a relatively good value, and then they get the quarterback, and then he's, there's more value than what you drafted him at. So I definitely understand that situation. Kelsey, listen, Kelsey's Kelsey. We've talked about Kelsey for a couple of years now, where if you have him, he's virtually going to die on your team for the most part, right? Unless you're able to pick up like a Dalton Kincaid in last year's draft, or a Jake Ferguson or somebody like that you kind of have waiting in the wings. So Kelsey's going to die on your team. He's amazing. He's still going to be a top 5 tight end next year, in my estimation, where he could finish, just because he is such a focal point, and he's got Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback. Evan Ingram is the real surprise here. And I think probably the best value pick at tight end, out of this past season, comparing to where you got him, and he finished as a tight end 2 in full PPR. And then my boy George Kittle, man. Listen, I've been a fan of George Kittle for quite a while now, but he will frustrate you. Like you said, there's no arguments there, but he can win you a week here and there. He can win you a week or two during your fantasy season from the tight end position, where he catches 6 passes for 95 yards and multiple touchdowns. Like, he's capable of doing that. So he's definitely a needle mover there. And listen, if they don't re-sign Ayuk, maybe that opens up Kittle a little bit more for this upcoming season. But I think they're slotted pretty right because of the age, because of who they play with, factoring all those things that we talk about, especially from the tight end position. And listen, all these guys are athletes and pass catchers, right? We're not talking about some blocking tight end that catches 40 passes a year. All these guys are pretty much top tier tight ends that are pass catchers in their respective offenses.
Of course, it's gonna depend on your situation, right? If you're trying to win right now, like, yeah, you might want Evan Ingram over Kyle Pitts, right? But
Yeah.
depending on
Yeah.
your team makeup, if you construct your roster, correctly, like, you could live with Kyle Pitts at tight end. Do you wanna go get Evan Ingram? Like, he's pretty cheap, like, nobody wants him for whatever reason. 100 and whatever catches, and still nobody basically wants him just because of his age, but he's gonna give you fantasy production. So if you are trying to win right now, if you are in that win now mode, of course, you're gonna want Evan Ingram over Kyle Pitts, just like if you're in rebuild mode, you're gonna want Kyle Pitts over Evan Ingram. So, depending on your team situation, obviously, that's gonna depend on who you want there. Joku. So, Joku's gonna be in the next tier, and I'll get to him in a second here. But the reason why I can't put Joku in that particular tier is because Joe Flacco, unfortunately, is not gonna be the quarterback. Let's get into the next tier here. We do got Njoku leading off this tier, along with Michael Mayer and
Ooh.
Freiermuth. This is a kind of
Okay.
a big tier. This is a big tier here, because I feel like they are all almost relatively similar, right?
The same.
Njoku, as I said before, does not have Flacco throwing him the football anymore, right? That is a big difference. Do they still continue to get him involved? Sure, but I think he's more of like a 5 to 10-ish tight end, right? Cole Kmet has consistently finished in the top 10. He's just a back end tight end 1 every single year. Jake Ferguson on the good offense. He's gonna finish in the top 10, 12. Goddard, same kind of thing, but he's always been injured. He hasn't finished
Mhm.
kinda in that top 10.
Mhm.
So, can he stay healthy? That's my worry
As
about
he's getting
him,
older.
because he's getting older as well, right? And then you've got some other guys on that offense, a team that doesn't throw the ball a ton. You've got Michael Mayer, who bad situation, but we know the prospect that he is. We know that he can play. We know he's a great tight end, and he's a young tight end. And then I've got Fryermuth in there as well, who was solid his first 2 seasons. Obviously, not great of what's going on there lately in Pittsburgh, but he's gonna be a free agent after next season. So there's a possibility he can go elsewhere. Hot take is that Fryermuth goes to Kansas City once Kelsey's possibly done.
Ooh.
1 more year. Do they go out and get like a Fryermuth? He can move, he can run, he can play in that slot, like, he can
Still
catch.
relatively
I
young. Yeah,
He's still
25.
relatively young. I think that would be a good kind of fit, and obviously that's best case scenario. But Fryermuth's a guy that can play, and I think that even if he's not on the Steelers, he's gonna go somewhere where he can produce. So, and we've seen that from him. That rounds off this particular tier. I do feel like they're kinda all kinda mushed together. They're all kinda back end tight end ones, basically. Mix them how you want, but I feel like they're all kinda, mushed together. But, yeah, what do you think about this particular tier here and these players?
Yeah, similar to the running back position, like tight ends, once you drop pretty much get out of that tier two, it's kind of you can mix and match however you want. I know a lot of people tend to stream tight ends in a lot of leagues. If you don't have one of those top really four guys in that tier one category, obviously you could throw Kelsey in there as well. So a lot of people tend to stream tight ends on a week to week basis if you don't have a top six ish guy, top eight ish guy. So there's really two guys who stand out here for me anyway, and it is Jake Ferguson because he is on a really good offense with a really good quarterback that throws the ball a ton. And then it's Michael Mayer. I love the prospect. I felt similar to him about as I did about Sam Laporta as a prospect, but I thought Sam Laporta would be more productive right away just because he was in a much better situation. But I think Vegas with Antonio Pierce, I think they have the right foundation in place from a head coaching scheme kind of standpoint where I think Michael Mayer will be a lot more productive in year two. And listen, I think Sam Laporta spoiled us all because we've talked about, and Dalton Kincaid to a lesser degree, because how often do we talk about the tight ends? And it's like, bro, these guys normally don't break out to that year three, year four type of thing because they also have additional responsibilities, blocking, line protection, protection schemes they have to know, all of those different things. So those tight ends usually don't break out from a fantasy standpoint until maybe year three, year four ish. So I think we got spoiled by Sam Laporta and, like I said, to a lesser degree, Dalton Kincaid. So those are the two guys I'm really honing in this particular tier is Jake Ferguson, like I said, because of the offense, who his quarterback is, and then Michael Mayer, just because I think he can be a really productive guy. If they could figure out and steady that ship at quarterback out there in Vegas, if they get a Russell Wilson, if they get a veteran guy, I feel a lot better about him scratching that top 12 um potential upside. But yeah, those are my two guys here, Ferguson and Mayer.
All right, let's get into the next tier here. I see someone said Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz leads off my next tier, and the only reason why I don't have him higher is because he doesn't have a contract. And I don't if he stays on the Texans and he gets the contract, then yeah, he's gonna move up. Like I want any piece of that Houston offense that I can get. So yeah, Schultz will definitely move up if he gets the contract. But does he? We don't know yet, so it's still a little bit of a risk.
Yep.
Next, I got your boy Luke Musgrave.
Okay.
I got Cade Otton, and I've got Likely in this particular tier as well. So a little bit of a smaller tier here, but guys that can play, but there are some question marks, and Likely just obviously stuck behind Mark Andrews. Does he wind up going somewhere else sooner or later, or does he get traded? I do like Musgrave over Kraft, so that's why I have him there. Spoke about Schultz. You want the tight end in that offense, but does he get the contract is the big question. I like Cade Otton as well, but in that particular offense with Baker Mayfield, he's not kind of peppering the tight end with targets. But Otton can play, when given the
Hmm.
opportunity. So yeah, what do you think about this tier four here and these players?
Dalton Schultz, clearly, if he remains on Houston, say they put him on a 2 or 3 year deal. Dalton Schultz is only 27. It feels like he's been around a lot longer than his age would suggest. So
Mhm.
Dalton Schultz, clearly, if he stays on the Texans, he has easily tight end one value, kind of in that mid tight end one. He could get into the top 10, with that offense and the way CJ Stroud's been throwing the ball. So I like where this is. The problem with the rest of these guys are obviously Musgrave is in a equal opportunity situation with Jordan Love, where there's no
Mhm.
clear kind of I feel like there's a different leading pass catcher every game for my Packers, every game. But Musgrave can play, and I like how they involve him. He could if Musgrave could get between 6 and 8 touchdowns next year, he has some really, really high upside. And I think with Jordan Love showing that he could throw the ball and find guys, especially down in the red zone, I think Musgrave, and also don't forget Musgrave got hurt. He was on the short term IR this season, mixed in there. So his numbers are a little skewed, or else I think he would have been more productive. We saw what he did in the game against Dallas, where he caught that long touchdown. So yeah, so all these other guys outside of Dalton Schultz, there are some questions about, but Dalton Schultz here has the highest upside of any of these guys.
Like the other reason why, I don't know about Schultz is because there's a guy that I put in the next tier that I really like. that was a good prospect, and he kinda came along when he needed to, was like Brevin Jordan. I mean,
Mhm.
he's a good kinda little sleeper that you can talk about, and I'll fill out this whole, I guess, kinda
When
bottom tier here, but Brevin
when
Jordan,
Schultz was
he's
out,
still
yeah.
signed through next season, so do they not wanna pay Schultz and just roll with Brevin Jordan and then, see what happens from there? Or do they just sign Schultz? I know the easy thing to say is like, "Yeah, they're gonna sign Schultz because he played so well," but it's not so easy, it's not so black and white like that. I've got Brevin Jordan down here, I've got Chig down here, I've got Kraft down here somewhere. And these are all guys that are like the bottomish tier. We don't kind of know exactly what's going to happen, but they're kind of the next guys that have opportunities to kind of move up in the rankings here. So you can throw Dolchich up there. And then I have like some sleeper guys like Jeremy Ruckert and Cole Turner down here. And then I wanted to talk about like where Waller fits in, and we'll talk about him in a second here. But these are the guys that I have on the bottom tier here, and then I have 2 rookies that we can kinda throw in there. But, I mean, Chig just didn't turn out to like what we thought he was. Obviously, they have a QB situation there. Kraft, obviously, that dual tight end role with Musgrave. Dolchich, I mean, coming back from injury, does he come back in a way? Jeremy Ruckert, the young tight end, does he just get replaced over there, or is he that next guy up? We did see some flashes from him, so he's a kinda just a sleeper that I wanted to mention in the video, as well as Cole Turner, there in Washington as well, with Logan Thomas getting up there. So, what do you think about this tier, Hammer?
Yeah, I think the guy that really stands out here for me is the guy leading off this tight end spot is Brevin Jordan. I mean, he was when Schultz was out, he was the hot pickup and he played pretty damn well, right? He jumped off your
Mhm.
screen. Able to make plays for you. So I like Brevin Jordan as well. If they do not sign Dalton Schultz, I believe the Houston Texans have like $70 million in cap space. They're virtually not paying anybody on that team. So do they say, hey, listen, we'll kind of keep this core together with CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and we add in the veteran Schultz to kind of steady the ship? I wouldn't be opposed to that. But they could say, hey, listen, we'll turn it over to Brevin Jordan and then ride from there. But Brevin Jordan's very interesting. Tucker Craft, the problem is his upside is always going to be limited.
Mhm.
Right? Like, I think if he was a featured tight end on a team with maybe a wide receiver that was the go-to guy, I think Tucker Craft could be really good. But obviously, he's virtually 1A, 1B with Musgrave, and they have like 3 or 4 wide receivers that they could throw to at any time. Aaron Jones is probably coming back. So where Tucker Craft is in the pecking order is why he's down here so low, and I can't really disagree with it. It's not because of the talent, not because he can't play. It's just because of the situation he's in and the guy that he's surrounded by. But he's a fantastic tight end. When Musgrave was out, he played and it played very well. It's almost like they kind of mirror each other in a sense. So I totally agree with that. But I think Brevin Jordan, if Schultz doesn't come back, has the highest upside out of this group.
Then we've got, like, Waller. Where do we put Waller? I mean, can't stay healthy, but he kinda gives you production. Like, does he sneak up into the back end 2, start a 3? I mean, where can we put a guy like Waller?
He would be at the end of 3 for me just because there's so many questions, right? Like you said, can't stay healthy. Where it's if he's on the Giants, you feel great about his prospects? Not really. I mean, at 31 years old, do we all of a sudden expect him to be healthy for an entire season? So,
He's signed, he's on the Giants. I mean, until 2027, he's a free agent.
yeah, but I'm not I'm not going to lose my mind. 52 catches for 552 yards and 1 touchdown.
How many games he played this year?
But it wasn't overly impactful.
I
Like
mean, he's already gonna be 32, and he
played
hasn't been
12,
able to stay what?
played 12.
Played 12 games. He's already 32, and he hasn't been able to stay healthy for
The last 3 years.
I feel like you can kinda throw him in, like, after a Goddard maybe as, like, a
I'd rather have
sleepy.
Mayer, I'd rather have Freiermuth, I'd rather
I
have
know,
Schultz, I'd
that's
rather
the
have
thing.
Kraft, I'd rather
That's
have Likely, I'd rather have Otten. I'll be honest, I'd rather have Brevin Jordan, I'd rather have all
that's it.
those guys.
14
20
in points per game, 9.4 points per game. I mean, he's just another Jag at that point. Even
Thank you.
still, Schultz was a point higher,
You're finishing in
Ferguson,
the 20s
McBride,
at tight end, that's not where
Kmet
you
was
wanna be.
2 points higher. Now granted, Giants offense was pretty trash, but so he's gotta be somewhere in the tier 3. He's gotta be I think the back end of tier 3, like you
That's
said,
fine.
might be, like, the perfect kinda spot-ish to put him. You wanna put him ahead of Freiermuth for this year because we don't know what's gonna happen, I'm okay with that. You know, you wanna take a one-year flyer with some upside over Mayer, like, I guess, but I think you're right, kinda the back end of this tier is probably where he's gotta go.
Listen, I think we get enamored with a lot of the older guys that we've seen, like, he's been dominant, like, he had 2 dominant years. If I need to remind people, those dominant years were in 2019 and 2020. We are going into 2024. He's played a total of 32 games in the last 3 seasons. 32 in 3 seasons, so he's averaging almost 11 games a season. And when he's playing those last 3 games, he's not moving the needle. Like,
Mhm,
I could get way better value down here in this particular range. Like Cole Kmet, clearly a better value.
mhm.
Gronk, a better value. Goddard, a better value. Like all those guys, even Schultz, a better value.
Yeah,
So I'll take that. And Kincaid played every single game. Kincaid missed 1 game.
yeah, and he's young, he's in a great offense, like, yeah,
And he's going to get better, you would imagine, with Josh Allen.
sure. Then we got the 2 rookies, right? We got Brock Bowers, who's, like, instantly gonna be basically a top 5. Like, instantly he's gonna go to the back end of the tier 1,
Mhm.
especially if he lands on, like, the Chargers, like, I mean, woof. I mean, he could be
Cincinnati.
up there, but we'll put him in the back end tier of tier 1. We'll see where he winds up landing, but I think he can be anywhere kinda in between the back end of tier 1 and, like, the front end of this tier 2 here, depending on the draft capital, depending on the landing spot, and then you've got JT Sanders, who probably could go, like, after Pitts, depending where he goes. You could put him there, maybe put him behind some of the older guys, but I think he'll be somewhere in this tier 2, so that's kinda how I would slot it at the moment. But that's pretty much it for the tight end rankings and tiers. Let me know what you guys think. There are a lot more guys this year that are more, impactful than we've had in years past, right? Like we said
Agreed.
earlier, it used to be kind of those top few guys. Now there's more of like a 7, 8, 9. Like there's more tight ends now that are producing and producing early.
That's what kind of excites me as well because it makes the drafts more interesting, right? Like if these tight ends are starting to elevate a little bit, like I don't think anybody is in that prime Kelsey territory yet, but if we have just this expanse of tight ends where, you basically got 1 through really 9 if you add in the rookie, if you add in Bowers, that expands it a little bit. Um, you basically got 1 through 9, 1 through 10. Like if I had any of those guys in tier 1 or 2, you feel pretty good about that as just a set it and forget it at the tight end spot. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting time we're getting into with a bunch of productive and younger up and coming tight ends.
I think Pitts is a good value at this point. Kincaid is another one. Like people aren't really extremely high on those guys. And then you have the guys that like nobody cares about, right? The Cole Kmets, the Fergusons, the Goddards, right? Nobody really cares much about those guys, so you can wait and grab one of those guys at the tight end position. I mean, we were
Hmm.
saying all last year to play Cole Kmet and Jake Ferguson from, like, week 1, and they both finished as top 10 tight ends, and all you had to do is play those guys every single week and just not worry about it. They're gonna give you some dud weeks, but they're also gonna win you some weeks. Tight end 7 in 2022, tight end 8 in 2023. We're hoping he gets a new quarterback that's gonna be passing the ball more. I mean, 719 yards on 73 catches. I mean, 90 targets. Does he see up to 100 possibly this year? Even still, like, I don't care. Give me the 90 targets. That's fine. Whatever. Give me tight end 8. I'm fine with that.
I don't think the drop off from after that third guy is as steep as it was in the couple of years past.
Oh, for sure. Like I said, like, you can make the argument to even put Kincaid and Pitts, like, up in tier 1, like, as those young
Mhm.
guys, because all it's gonna take is just one good season for those from those guys for them to be considered possibly as, the tight end 1, just like all these other guys. So, I mean, if Mark Andrews comes out and has another 1,300-yard season with double-digit tutties, I mean,
You're gonna feel really good about it.